Hello, my name is Parker,
And my name is Ned.
and this is the Force Unlimited, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode number 14, and we are recording on May 5th, Revenge of the 5th. Hope your Star Wars Day, May 4th, was awesome. I think everybody who plays Star Wars Unlimited played in a Star Wars Unlimited event, except Ned and I.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I was holding
Yeah.
out for showdowns. As a parent, I can't take every weekend off.
That is
But
precisely the situation. Yeah.
yeah, we didn't have showdowns
Yeah.
in Portland, but we had a 1K that was well attended, and I don't want cash. I want Mace Windu. But I feel like everybody at the Red Castle Sealed Escalation League, everybody I talked to at Guardian was pinging, "Hey, what are you bringing? Are you coming?" Blah blah blah, and I was like, "No, but have fun." So
Aw.
my son and I went to the mall for Star Wars Legos,
Oh, nice.
which was the mall with Star
Yeah.
Wars Legos. That was fine. Um, Ned, why don't you tell us about the match we played today?
Parker, unfortunately, that information requires that we talk about the exact nature of the match that we played, which requires us to go further down into the episode. So, can you fill some time
That
with
is
some
true.
anecdotes? Yep.
Yes, I can. Today's episode is called Weird Formats, and we'll be talking about some weird formats. And I don't have any anecdotes today, Ned. Man, I even put in the script share anecdotes, and
Yeah.
I've got nothing. I mean, the bar
Well-
of what I consider worth sharing is pretty low, but I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, no, why don't we just jump in then? So before we get into weird formats, Parker, can you talk about what it means to be a format?
Sure. Well, so this is we like to define terms, Ned, and I was actually
Yes.
like rolling around all weekend in my head in this because like, wait, so
Yeah.
format could be like a weird way of playing, like
Yeah.
a different rules framework. But I had asked you a few episodes back, what do you call like a window of time in a game? Like Spark of
Yeah.
Rebellion comes out March 8th,
Yeah.
and Shadows of the Galaxy comes out July 12th. And I'm going to pause for there. Anecdote.
Yeah.
I don't know if Xander was driving this, but what the heck with all of the previews coming on one day? Like that was nuts.
wild.
Every content creator dropping theirs like within hours of each other on the same day. They got the whole week. The only thing we got on Friday, I mean, we got Wrecker, which is
Sure.
my son's favorite heroic character in Star Wars. But like, there were no content creator drops on Friday. It was mind-boggling to me that everything came within 3 hours, and maybe that was orchestrated. But to say, "Hey, preview season is upon us," but it was a lot.
It's
went
the
from
key
main
turn
deck-
principle, right? It's the key
What?
turn principle, where
Yeah.
you want to be having your power turn on.
Oh
you know,
yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just the Boba
Yeah.
meta manifesting in real life.
Precisely.
Yeah, that was rough. So, but so I was saying, okay, so Spark on March 8th,
Yeah.
Shadows on July 12th.
Yeah.
What do you call that window of time? And you told me that was called a format.
I would call that a format. Yeah, I might,
Right.
fight me, but I think that
So
yeah.
I always thought it, from where I'm coming from, those were called blocks, right?
Well, a block is a format. So I mean, again,
Well, I guess
we're
a
gonna
block
go-
is a subset of a format in that
Format,
you're
yeah.
in a block, but a format consists of multiple blocks.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in order to define our terms, there's essentially a rules format,
yeah.
right? And then a temporal format. And we're not talking about, for the most part, temporal formats. Like
Generally, no. Yeah,
so
so-
we are going to talk about weird frameworks for gameplay and deck building, right?
Right. Yeah. So to kind of break apart the definition of a format a little bit about how I feel about it. Format has three features. It has the cards that you are allowed access to. It has the rules behind deck construction, and then it has the actual game rules. Right. The combination of those three defines a format. So why we've got
Card
this
pool,
temporal.
the deck rules, card pool, deck building rules, and play rules.
Yes.
Okay.
Those three define a format. So that's why when we add in shadows, we're going to be in a different format, right? Because the card pool that's available to us will be different.
Okay. And I'm going to rule that, I'm going to, for the most part, say that's irrelevant. We'll come
Sure.
back to that because that is not weird, right?
No, it's not weird. Perfectly normal. Yeah. Yeah.
A new set comes out, those cards are added to the pool. Maybe an old set rotates out. Also normal. So that's not weird.
No.
I want to go through kind of just some weird formats because I think towards that point, and we'll circle back to this, but of there being three pillars, the card pool format, I think, and the deck construction format, tend to come up, I think, in responses to supply, right? When you can buy when everybody can buy every card in the game that they want, then you often don't. There's less of a need for that. I'm not saying there's no need. There absolutely is, but a lot of those are in response to the weird vagaries of supply. And right now, supply is rough.
Yes, very tight.
Supply is real rough, and so this is, I think, the window where weird formats often can shine. But I want to take care. So not weird would be standard Premier, right? Whatever cards you can take to a showdown. That's not weird.
That's not weird.
Limited and draft, limited draft and sealed, the two limited formats, as kind of just those terms are accepted to mean. Not weird.
Generally not weird.
Format. But I do want to just kind of briefly address maybe one of the elephants in the room, Twin Suns.
Yes.
Which is, in a sense, a weird format, despite the fact that it is out of the gate sanctioned by Fantasy Flight, that they built Twin Suns in as the game was being designed, right? So Spark of Rebellion cards were designed in response to Twin Suns. They were tweaked to be more fun in a multiplayer format. So that's on the edge of weird. And and I don't think it's, I mean, at this point every content creator has talked at length about Twin Suns to a greater extent than we have. And I don't know that it's worth diving too much into Twin Suns. If you're listening, you are certainly aware of what Twin Suns is. But I do think it's worth highlighting, and I especially want to ask a little bit about Commander, also known as, formerly known as Elder Dragon Highlander.
EDH,
Because that is, in my mind, one of the original weird formats in Magic.
I would completely agree. It, along with two-headed giants / two-headed dragons, are the weird formats that are occasionally supported that have, one of them stayed at a certain level of popularity, and I'm a big fan of. The other of which completely took off and basically took over the game. But rather than diving too deep into the weeds here, because we're not here to talk about Magic, we're here to talk about SWU, the encapsulated history lesson.
Please.
Yes, Magic had for a long time a problem that big, expensive, splashy cards were basically unplayable in wide swaths of.
By big, expensive, splashy, do you kind of mean Timmy?
Yeah, like big Timmy cards, but they don't even big Johnny cards were not really feasible. So the kind of titular example of these was the Elder Dragons, which are these big, expensive dragons that do big, expensive game-defining effects, but the
game's over by the time you get there.
Not relevant. And beyond that, Magic has a very aggressively costed removal paradigm, so that creatures just do not survive. Unless they have protection. So EDH was created in response to that by, there's disputes about which play group started it first. Sheldon Meanery, I think I'm saying his name correctly, became kind of the go-to guy for sort of defining what it means to be in the format. But fundamentally, it was an attempt to take the base rules of Magic, the card pool that is available in Magic, and do three things. Number one is multiplayify it in a way that you can't with, or you can, but it's substantially less fun with standard Magic decks. To make it more exciting, where you're able to do like bigger and more impressive things than you can in kind of a standard, a more normal Magic environment. And then the third idea behind it was to allow for people to play more stuff in terms both temporally, like every card is available, unlike most other formats which have like temporal restrictions on them. But also because of the singleton nature of it, it encourages you to play lots of different stuff, so you get to do lots of different things. And the format has evolved, and it started out kind of as like a thing that judges did to pass the time, and has become at this point like I think the
default way of playing Magic.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
When you and I go down to Guardian Games, like there's nobody playing standard. Everybody's looking for pods of 4.
Yeah, I mean, standard has a knight, right? Like there's standard knights and there's modern knights, but like yeah,
right.
The default casual way to play is EDH.
Right, but the reason that I think it's kind of important to note where Twin Suns come from is, and I share your love, by the way, of Two-Headed Dragon and Emperor. Emperor feels like the obvious multiplayer. I mean, despite the fact that Emperor is a 6-player format, which is even harder to sell than 4.
Yes.
Given the, I mean, that's a pretty powerful word in the context of Star Wars.
Yeah.
But I always thought like Two-Headed Dragon, which is the 2v2 format. When they said Twin Suns, I was like, oh, definitely going to be.
Yeah,
like
no, that's obviously it. No,
obviously it, but no, the Twin Suns is about the leaders.
It's the two leaders. Two leaders.
But the reason why I think it's really the power of Commander is that to this day, as I understand it, Commander's not actually, they print Commander products, but they don't control Commander.
Correct. The Commander rules
they don't
committee
control
does.
Commander in the way WotC also doesn't control Critical Role. Like they're very symbiotic.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But it is an independent organization, right?
Correct.
That drives Commander.
Yes. They cannot be told what to do, but you know.
Do you like your cushy Magic position? Then yeah. But so it's now the default way of playing Magic that WotC spends a lot of money that balances cards around. I mean, you know, and better podcasts than we have kind of dealt with the fact that it's a rough scene out there if you don't like Commander, and how is Magic being warped by Commander. And I know Mark Rosewater has talked at length about maybe we need to dial back the Commanderness of Magic a little bit. But it is, at the end of the day, it's a fan format created by fans.
Yep.
And then is getting baked into, you know, you can trace the lineage baked into Star Wars Unlimited. For those who don't play Magic and don't care about Magic, it is also a singleton format like Twin Suns that has a higher number of cards in the deck. Not like Twin Suns now, but like Twin Suns in November?
Future?
Set 3, set 4?
I think that's right,
That's going up to 80. It has a higher life pool, which is not true in Twin Suns, but I think also reflects the nature of Twin Suns, where the winner is the person with the most life.
Yep.
And to make it a slower game and so forth. And so I think there's real power in these fan formats. Because, I mean, they can become, I mean, you can create it at your kitchen table when supply is short, when you don't like the current standard Premier format, and end up being the default way of playing the game. So I think I saw a great tweet that said, what's the difference between being playing your first board game and being a board game content creator? About 3 nights. I also think that's true of how long between playing your first game and wanting to homebrew your first game, right? And that's the power of physical card games, right? Like nobody's playing homebrew Runeterra or homebrew Hearthstone or homebrew Snap. Like the only way weird formats come to pass in those is if the developers think they can monetize them. But you can take your Star Wars Unlimited cards and make a whole new format that doesn't exist. It's constantly people doing it on Reddit. And please go ham, especially with supplies short. So not a lot to dive into Twin Suns, but I think it's important to note that its lineage is a homebrew.
It is explicitly, it is a weird format that has become normalized.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's really just, it's funny that it's the, and I mean, I'm not the only one. It's the game of tactical whining, right? Strategic whining.
God,
and
that, ooh, yeah. No,
AKA politicking, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons it's taken off, because it creates a game where you don't want to remove somebody too early so they whine, right? And then everybody gets to play. And I think that's what's really, I mean, what people want is a multiplayer way to play, right? Like, so that
yes, yeah, people want a multiplayer way to play. I mean, like, you are unfortunately hitting the buttons that make me really not
sad and angry at the same time.
Yeah, it's like, come on, man.
I don't want to kick. I don't want to kick it, but I think that's. I mean, I think that's important. You know, when I'm playing at Red Castle, where we kind of are in control of our own ability to play. Do we play each other?
Yeah.
Or do we? You know, there's no tournament structure. It's just a casual open night. You get into that kind of middle school, high school dance dynamic of like, I liked playing that game with you, but I don't want to play too many games with you because then I'm bogarting you. And what if there's somebody else with a cool deck that I want to see? You know, and you get this weird vibe of like, should we play more together or
yeah.
You know, I don't want to offend you, but also I'd like to go play another deck. Similarly, I think, you know, a multiplayer formats solve that. You've got a group of people, four people. You don't need to try to keep finding new ways to pair off. It's just we're all locked in. And
and also just like having more players in the game allows for more niches to exist, right? It's just that the strategic whining element of it, I think, is the absolute. It is a natural feature of most Commander environments, but it is also among the things that kind of set me off, because I like I have said, I would like to be a Spike. I'm not spending enough time in here, but the like whining rule zero kind of discussions, it sends like a red light flashing in the back of my head.
And I think that's another. I mean, that speaks to the size of the card pool in Magic that you. So you're hitting two separate things. One is what kind of commander are we playing?
Yeah.
And like, oh, don't make your commander deck too good, because the card pool is big enough that you can literally just make all negation effects and weird, you know, or whatever, and weird unfun effects. Whereas, you know, hopefully Star Wars Unlimited is a pretty far off point where you're saying, well, don't bring that card. It's like, you know what? You want to bring Overwhelming Barrage or Boba Fett or whatever it is that just seems so terrible. Guess what? It's 1 in 80 cards, and we haven't reprinted enough effects, right? Like Magic reprints so many similar effects. For me, the strategic whining is solved to a lesser extent in the Twin Suns format by the fact that the game is over when somebody's out.
Yes,
so like,
I think that's a huge advantage.
Right. The desire, like, you don't need to avoid getting kicked out, because the game will just end when you get kicked out. So you start the next game and get over it. So
no, like they clearly learned a lot, but I think we spent a lot of time talking about Twin Suns, which is not even a weird format. Yeah.
For us to not talk about Twin Suns. Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk briefly about Sealed Escalation League. Now, dear listener is very familiar with Sealed Escalation League. I keep talking about my awesome Sealed Escalation League at Red Castle Games, so I'm not going to belabor it. But briefly, if you're just a new dear listener, it starts as a regular sealed game, 4 to 6 packs, build a deck, yay! And then each week you get to add 1 pack. And in and of itself, mildly interesting, because you get to see the meta shift. You know who you're facing next week, which is something you don't see in Limited outside of a White Room context. At the recent Guardian draft, Ned, you were noting that people tend to, because Heroic Cunning is weak in Premier, people tend to undervalue it in draft, and it's actually just fine in draft, and you can get fed.
Yep.
But that's White Room. It's not what is Sally playing. Sally always runs this, which excuse me, you always get in a premiere context. You get that in sealed escalation. Like it builds and builds, and you get to see, and that's fine. That's great. But what we're, as noted, weird formats often respond in shifts to concerns about production. And if you are
Yes.
concerned about production, which I think everybody is, supply. If you are concerned about Shadow's supply, hopefully there's more, right? Hopefully people are placing pre-orders, whatever. But is there enough to run uh, a night, right? Like, is there enough to run drafts every week? Unlikely. What Matt at Red Castle has done that I think is really amazing is that sealed escalation helps solve that because there's a reason to come back every week, and you only need 1 pack per person instead of 3 packs per person every. But he's folded in other weird formats, so we'll get into it. But he's had a commons only format. He's had Twin Suns coming up, so you're constantly rebuilding your deck, and this creates like a really vibrant group of people who are really excited to find out what everybody's building and talking about. And I think every store is looking for sales, right? Like,
Yes.
obviously that's life under capitalism. But beyond that, when you're looking at a TCG, I assume two things you're looking at are community and consistency, right? You want a group of people who come play and do so consistently. This provides that. The same people come back week after week after week. Somebody doesn't make it, there's a line out the door to take up their spot. And it's because it's weird and vibrant and different. So without diving too much into it, I do want to say, if you are somebody, if you're in a place where you can play SWU, Star Wars Unlimited, at your local game store, if you have a lot of game stores like we do, if you have social cachet in your Star Wars Unlimited community, which we don't, talk to your LGS. Say, hey, here's a way we could do things that doesn't require the commitment of draft, but gets
Right.
people back week after week after week. And I think this is a chance for people to have that consistent community that leads to sales and uptick and burgeoning
Yeah.
groups. But Sealed Escalation League is probably even tamer on its own than Twin Suns. It's just standard limited sealed, and then open one more pack and make less terrible sealed decks. So not a lot to talk about, but let's talk about the format that we played today, Ned.
Yes.
Winston draft. Now I'm going to take the high notes before we get into our Siskel and Ebert. Winston draft covered by both the Garbage Rollers and KTOD. That's how I got excited about it. I pitched Ned on it. Ned, being a TCG connoisseur, was aware of it. Neither of us had ever done it. The basic premise is you put cards in 3 piles, you take piles, and then you build decks.
Yep.
That's an oversimplification, but if you want the
Extreme.
rules,
Like there's a lot of subtleties going on that I think is very interesting, potentially.
So before we get into it, just so that our cards are on the table, so to speak, Ned, Siskel and Ebert, how'd you feel, Ned? 2 thumbs down. It was not a pleasant experience, I think, for either of us.
No.
We were pumped going in.
Yeah.
There's a high likelihood, I think, for me, it was a skill level, but
I think it is partially skill. So just to like dive in a little bit more, unless you want me to hold off, but
no, dive in. I will say, I tweeted, but I want to say shout out to our bartender. Who
huge props.
I was at my pre-release and just kept coming by and talking to us about our game. That was like just absolute fun to have like the game recognized in public by somebody who's like really jazzed. And I'm glad we did it at a bar and not a game store. Felt weird to tip him Fet's Fire Spray, but whatever. He said he needed it, and it's a rare that I didn't need. I also tipped cash. I'm not a terrible person, dear listener.
No.
So dive into it, Ned.
So the way that it works is that you are, like draft, you're in a limited environment, and also like draft, part of the skill is not just in playing the games, but also in selecting the cards that are going to make up your card pool. And that's kind of the theory behind draft. And the difference between draft and sealed is that in draft, you have this like pre-stage, the draft, where you are helping to shape the card pool that you will then use in the deck building phase. And then the deck building phase helps to influence how you play in the games. Right?
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
it was absolutely fascinating to me. First draft, I didn't know how to read signals. I had read about them, but I wasn't aware of what was happening, and that was a bit of a rough scene. Second draft, I felt so much more. Okay, that's what a signal is.
Yeah.
And just it felt so much smoother. The deck came together better. This one, zero. Winston draft. There's no signaling between you.
I mean,
and
there's
me,
a
right?
little bit. There's a little bit. So, there's like the really over the top signals that we get from, okay, these are the leaders that we drafted. So the way that we did Winston is we did like a snake leader selection. And it ended up where Parker had all villainy leaders. And so, like that was locked for him.
Yeah, our leader pool.
Yeah.
My leader pool was Boba IG88, obviously the 6 of 6 picks, and Krennic, and Ned. You had Cassian,
Yep.
Leia, who was your
Tarkin.
villainy choice? And Tarkin.
Yeah.
And Ned and I, not the world's best players,
No.
but not
Not
the
even
worst.
in the conversation. Yeah.
And neither of us at the end of it was able to make a legal deck out of 2 colors.
Yep. Yep.
Or 3, plus more out.
You're right.
But 2 base colors. So we ended
Yeah.
up using Twin Suns 2
Double-
leader format just to
Yeah.
allow us to make, which was just, that just
Right.
was, wow, we couldn't even build decks.
Yeah. And like maybe just but by the raw math, right? Like if you're only able to play out of 6 aspects, if you're able to play 3 of them, then that means that you're getting exactly half of each card pool. And so if there's any overlap in the aspects that you pick, there's just not enough cards to make it go.
Yeah. And I was actually shocked because I couldn't even build a legal deck out of 3 colors. I had to get a 4th.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, I was clearly too selective, and I didn't take enough big garbage piles. I took 1 card piles too often, but you also couldn't, which is what shocked me. Which meant that if I wasn't, in theory, you should have been able to, right?
Right. Like so the problem is that we both took blue. Right. I took blue because there was some reasonably good blue stuff that I saw early on, and so like if I took nothing but red and green and you took nothing but like blue and yellow, we probably could have made it. And you took all the villainy stuff and I took all the heroism stuff, and we had explicitly just like divided the cards this way. We could have made it work, but
then at that point, why are you drafting?
Yeah, that
Right,
it's
like we
just
could just
not a
put the
thing.
pool in it.
Yeah.
Open 6 packs and split the cards.
Yeah.
It was so. So I'm looking at each pile.
Mm-hmm.
The hate didn't feel worth it because, hate drafting you shouldn't generally do it in
No.
draft, but because if you're taking a card that's really good for them at the expense of yourself, all you're doing is hurting yourself in you're competing in a greater pool.
And you're also sending them a bad signal, right? Like to the point about signaling, like draft is a dance. You want them to be in the aspects that you are not. And so if you are taking the good cards from a particular aspect, especially early in the draft, then they don't know what aspects they should be, and they will end up stepping on your toes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I didn't feel like there was really any signaling beyond the leaders. So
No.
I'm looking at piles of cards that I don't want, and I didn't feel like there was a meaningful choice, right? Like, okay, there's 3 heroism cards here. I don't have any heroism leaders, so like I'm not going to take it just to spite you. But there's also not an incentive for you to take it right away because it's just going to get left there to grow.
Yeah, just leave it until there's a good neutral card out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was I think my most unsatisfying SWU experience to date.
Yeah, it was not great.
And in our games we went 2-1. So
Yep.
at first I thought, am I just angry out of spite? I played Krennic and Boba. I got a fire spray. I got a cunning. I mean, I had juice. There was gas in the tank, but didn't really come together. Like I didn't. I had a lot of like mediocre garbo to just fill out my colors. I
Yep.
feel like your deck lacked a bit of a game plan, but was just. I think you were playing the deck I wanted to play of just lots of green, blue, good stuff.
Yeah, no, that's where I ended up, right? Is that like heroism, green, blue, there was just a lot of good stuff. There weren't any particular power cards that I saw that would pull me in a direction. So I played Leia, Cassian, with blue as my base color, coming in from a security complex that I got, I think, last pick,
Yeah.
which was, I'm not sure whether or not it was worth it, the 5 health versus the shield, but it felt wrong not to use it since I was
Yeah.
going to be playing blue. So
Yeah. It
yeah,
just. We talked a bit that maybe it would be better with 8 packs. Like, and you commented
yeah,
that. So Winston draft created by Richard Garfield as a
yeah,
way to draft with one other person for Magic.
yeah,
And so I was like, oh, draft for two. Isn't that perfect for you and me? Like, we're
yeah.
dads getting out to a draft
We
night.
get our hard. Yeah, no, it takes some finagling.
There's some negotiation, but hey, you and
Yeah.
me, we can find that time.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be great if we could have a wonderful draft experience? I set aside some product for me to draft with friends. Wouldn't that be delightful? Lo and behold, no. And it didn't feel like a format that was optimized for a draft with one other person. It felt like it was a format that was optimized for, do you only have 6 packs? And like, you can't put together a full pod. This is what
So
you could do.
in
It's
defense,
better than just opening them, maybe.
in defense of Winston draft, I'm going to note that the Magic color system is very different than the SWU color system. Right? Is that in SWU, if you're playing out of aspect, it's just +2 cost. In Magic, if you're playing the more colors that you play, it's not plus N cost. Like you can still play on curve in a 5-color deck. It's just that the odds of you having a fail game go up. So you're essentially, and because of the way that the morality axis works in SWU, it means that a bunch of the pairs cards that are like heroism, vigilance are just not accessible to a villainy player at reasonable cost. Whereas in Magic, if I'm playing black and you're playing white, if a card is like white green, it's not necessarily any worse for me than if it was blue green, right? Whereas in SWU, white green is always worse for the villainy. Heroism green is always worse for the villainy player than a
Right.
theoretical card that would be vigilance.
Yeah, no, I'm not critiquing the Winston draft format. It
Yeah.
just was really
Doesn't work for
unsatisfying.
Yeah,
I don't know
no.
that I'd rather that 8 packs would have made it better, right? Like at a certain point, just keep
It
going.
would have made
up until you
workable
have 12.
decks. Yeah, but I'm not moved by it.
It's not how I will spend packs again in the future. So
No.
it was a interesting experiment. I'm glad we did it for that.
Yes. Yeah.
But when the highlight of our 3 matches was that the bartender knew the game, that's damn near
Yeah.
the weird format. But a classic take on different ways of doing a deck constructed, right? And it's weird because it's not the standard draft. So of note. Now,
So, yeah.
rarity-based formats. I was going to jump into this.
Well,
So
before
you've
we go
already-
into rarity-based format,
Sure.
I think that it is important to talk about rarity-based formats, and we will. But I think it's also important to talk about why we're doing this, right? Like, why do people play weird formats? There is a novelty aspect of you get to look at new cards, you get to look at old cards in different ways, right? Like, that's one of the fundamental.
I think that's
yeah.
that's a higher level way of thinking of it.
Yeah.
I think the initial case is I want to change the assumptions about the card pool,
Yep.
or it's a way of dealing with Mr. Briefcase or Mr.
Yep.
Suitcase, right? Like,
Yep.
I can't afford cards, you know, or I'm an amateur game designer. I have an
Yeah.
idea. Wouldn't this card be cool if it worked in a different way? Well, what if I just change the entire context of the
Let's
game?
change the rules so to make it better,
Change the
right?
rules, and
Yeah.
which you can do, and you should do. But
And it worked,
the,
right? Like Commander was designed to make Big Timmy cards more playable, and by God, they succeeded, right?
yeah. And so you can just tweak. Oh, you feel like the
Yeah.
early game isn't fun? What, start everybody at 4 or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, but so I think it's often. I mean, it's really just in my mind 2 axes. It's how do I change? I mean, what cards are in the pool, and then how do you build a deck?
Yeah.
Often relate.
Yes.
What cards you build in the deck feel like either a reflection of what cards are in the pool. So, for example,
I mean, let's take
Winston
limited.
is a weird deck construction rules, but it's really just meant to reflect that you're playing with sealed packs. Or
Yep.
like Singleton of Commander and Twin Suns feels like a game design challenge of like use more interesting cards.
Yeah, you use more different stuff, and let's increase the variance, right? Let's make this not, let's make the games feel more different each time you play.
Right. And yeah, it's just to shake up the staleness of the format, right? Like use cards. I mean, they have to create draft chaff,
Right.
but in Premiere, that they are cards are draft chaff.
Yes.
So what if we tweaked the underlying assumptions such that they were viable, right? In a Twin Suns game, a lot of cards that you otherwise wouldn't run, you have to run because you're stuck with singletons.
Right, but also to get back to limited, right? Like it's not just about the cards that you have access to, it's also about the play patterns, right? Limited encourages a play pattern that is it tends to be a lot more focused around basic stuff because most of the cards that you have are more basic because they're commons, because they're uncommons, right?
Right.
Blocking and your combat math tend to be more important in a limited format because you're not, when turn
There are fewer
8 rolls
complicated
around,
shenanigans.
yeah, you're not worried about any of the like big things, or you're a little bit worried about them, but you're not expecting them as much. So you see more of like the kind of core elements of the game. And I think that a lot of formats emerge out of that desire or the desire to preserve certain styles of play just preserve them, right? Like,
yeah, let's talk about rotation based formats. Let's jump ahead one. So I find this fascinating.
Yes.
So when I got into Magic, there was no such thing as standard. There was just Magic. And
yes. Well,
you could go.
There was Type 1 and Type 2. You got
Sure.
You got in
Yeah.
it. Yeah. You got in around Odyssey, right? Or no, you got out around Odyssey.
No,
Yeah.
I got in on unlimited. Like when I went to buy packs at the store, you could buy Alpha on the shelf. And I remember like middle school Parker asking the Simpsons comic book guy behind the counter, like what's reprehensible human being. What's the difference between like this alpha, this beta, and this unlimited? And then, and he's like, well, they're all the same cards, just some of them are worth more.
Yeah.
What? And what? And so, I mean, you could buy alpha and play them in your deck.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so there was the window of Type 1 and Type 2.
Yeah.
And the constant renaming and everything. And then you had Legacy and Standard. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So there's all the cards and there's this concept of rotation. Cool.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, there are definitely some powerful cards. And then we have Vintage, which is for people who want to play with all the cards but don't want to buy a $10,000 card.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, now we've got Modern.
Yeah,
And
modern.
The whole thing just feels like Goldilocks. Like, oh, this card pool's too big. This card pool's too small. Like, and everybody's just
Right,
trying to
but
find this weird.
Magic has enough people and enough of a card pool that you can do that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Not critical. It's just it shocks
yeah,
me. There's this constant desire to be like, well, that you know. And I don't know about Arena, so don't at me. But like,
sure.
okay, so we've got modern, but that's still too much. So it's like Pioneer. Like, okay, we're gonna make modern, but
So,
not modern. Still more than standard,
right.
but less than modern. And you know that's gonna bifurcate again in 5 years.
Yeah. So, in defense of rotation-based formats and understanding like the motivation behind it, right? Let's start off by talking about when there's no rotation. When there's no
Sure.
rotation, if there is a card that is very powerful, that is more powerful than it should be, that card will continue in the card pool forever, right?
Yes.
So rotation is a way of undoing past mistakes in a less traumatic way than banning cards, right? Like if you don't like,
I mean that is one thing you can do with rotation. Yeah.
right, yeah. If you don't like, and you can do all different kinds of things, but like the theory behind rotation, as far as one of the theories behind rotation, as far as I understand it, beyond just like let's sell more product because yada yada yada, but is that as game designers, it allows you to take slightly more risks than you would otherwise, and it helps to stall the onset of power creep. Because if you want people to buy the new stuff, you're not having to just make it strictly better. It's
Sure.
right.
And
so,
it allows
so
you
you've got
to
that.
tweak, and there's
Yeah.
only so many flavors of Waylay that can be on the shelf, and so
Sure.
right. And that's great.
So
For me, what boggles my mind is that the rotation-based patterns in Magic that will inevitably crop up in Star Wars Unlimited aren't fixed, right? So standard is a window.
Yes.
It was the most recent 2 years. What, they just bumped it to 3 years. So it's now into the past. And yet all these other formats are defined as line in the sand in perpetuity forever.
So there was a format that was called extended, that was essentially big standard, right? Like it was. Yeah, it was standard plus.
This isn't a Magic podcast, but it seems weird to me. Like if the goal of the goal of rotation-based formats, as I understand it, is I want to one of two things. It's I want to spend money less fast. I don't want to keep up with standard. Yeah. So I want my cards that I spend $50 on to be useful longer,
still playable. Yeah.
And also some combination of man, this was the best.
Yeah, no, like that boomer nostalgia, right? Like,
it's
the
just
Magic
pure
boomer
boomerism,
nostalgia, right? You gotta have that, right? Because people like certain play patterns, and to the extent that they can keep enjoying those play patterns without necessarily making the whole game like, gosh, do you remember when this particular like powerful standard deck was tops? I do, and I'm going to keep playing that deck, and I'm going to keep swapping out cards as like more stuff comes in, but like I get to still experience that play pattern.
See, I don't understand that as like a proper format. Like the idea that there needs to be nights for that without rotation, right? Like slower rotation, sure, but why there isn't a 10 years of Magic that is just a rolling 10 years? Because you want to play like, oh, it's the summer of 2007 again. I loved Magic in summer 2007. Like, okay, great for a one night or whatever, or a fun, weird tournament. But to just have this like perennially summer of 2007.
Right, but it's summer of 2007 versus summer of 2013, which is better, right?
God, no. And that's going to come to, I mean, you know, looking up stuff for this episode, I went down a rabbit hole of like Pokemon weird formats, and all of their weird formats are just people yelling at each other about which year was the good year of Pokemon cards. Yeah. And it's like, here's the format is this year. And it's like, that's the format. I'm like, that just sounds miserable. Like, you know, if you just want to play the same game forever, like there's a lot of board games out there in the world that will, you know.
They're quite good.
People are still playing Diplomacy. Like Kissinger played Diplomacy. Like the game, you know, like has been around for a while. People are still, you know, the whole appeal for me is the constant sense of new discovery.
Yeah. But like having these formats when you are a sufficiently well-established card game, like the danger of having more formats is that formats split people, right? Like if you're talking about that community, the getting people together, the more formats you have, the more chances you are for you to show up to play. I want to play this particular format, but nobody else wants to play this format. and like the groups get smaller and smaller. You're dividing your player base
Yep.
in fewer and fewer buckets.
But
But
if the
you
player base
also
is getting
want
bigger and bigger, right? Yeah.
right, like as your player base is getting bigger and bigger, some people don't want to be in the same bucket as other people, right? And some people, and so having these as safety valves, it's not just like, okay, you're gonna play with this or you're just not gonna play. It's like you want to boomer, let's talk about Pokemon cards, right? Like you want to be a Pokemon boomer, great, you can play that I don't know anything about Pokemon, but
Yeah.
yeah,
It boggles my mind, the idea
yeah.
of there being a long-standing recurring game night for, I want to pretend it's this 1 year when the game that I play is good. Like,
I will check back. You know, they're designing out many sets. I will check back in 5 to 7 years, and see if you want to relive the glory days of. Oh man, do you remember when Shadows first came out? And
I mean, again,
yeah,
as a night,
yeah.
yes, as like a recurring format,
Okay, all right. We'll see.
you
We'll
know.
see.
So we'll see. Yeah, let's check
Yeah,
back in after set 9 and
yeah,
after set 15 and see how we feel. So okay,
yeah.
so that's rotation based format. So
Yes.
I'm unhappy with the nature of the whole card pool, and so I'm gonna change the card pool. Then
Yeah.
there's kind of two related things. What cards can you put in your deck, which
Yes.
is primarily rarity based format. So
Yes.
I'm gonna draw a line in the sand. I think so. Magic has a format called, correct me if I'm wrong, Pauper is the
Yes,
common
Popper is
only.
all commons. Then there's Peasant, which is commons and uncommons, and then I forget what the name is for commons, uncommons, and rares, but no mythics. But there's
I
a
thought,
name for it that nobody plays.
and then there's Penny, which is just
Penny
one
Dreadful
set
is
common.
any card that you can buy for $1. Yeah, or sorry, for a penny. Yeah.
I think I've heard some, people are trying to want to bring this to Star Wars Unlimited. And I think that's a fantastic idea. And people want to call commons only Padawan, and I think that's a terrible idea. Commons only should be called Youngling, and
Commons
Padawan
and
should be
uncommons.
commons and uncommons. And
Yeah.
and Magic, where Magic stakes its power level at rare, correct? Like that's the build arounds.
For limited, typically the build arounds are uncommons. Is
Okay.
that the rares are like your bombs, uncommon is your signpost build arounds, and then commons are your interchangeable, they do the thing.
I just feel like, so I played my first common only night on Thursday, and it was an unpleasant scene, I think, for most people. I had a great time.
Yeah.
I just kept winning game after game after game because turns out Red Chewy is primarily a common deck.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to tweak down to common only. But a lot of people are just like gutting their decks, and there's so many linchpin uncommons. And
Yeah.
the goal of rarity-based formats, as I understand it, things like is I want this to be about the game, not about money. And
Yes, but also like, so let's talk about like rares and legendaries. Rares and legendaries, if you have a Vader in your deck, let's if you have Vaders in your deck, the game to a certain extent becomes about playing around Vader, right? Not or overwhelming barrage. I think is a perfect example, right? Like if you are in a format that includes overwhelming barrage, a certain percentage of your brain capacity is always, do I have to think about overwhelming barrage here, right?
sure.
And that's because at rare and at legendary, the power levels are such that a single card can swing the game.
Note, sir, that Overwhelming Barrage is an uncommon.
Yes. Yes.
So
Noted.
yeah,
So noted.
I agree that
Yeah.
there's a as much as they say we don't tie power level to rarity.
I mean, it's true and it's not, right? Like you can absolutely point to rares that are stinkers, right? And commons that are better than those stinker rares.
Yes. I mean, there's definitely
Yeah.
commons that are getting played way more than, like, You're My Only Hope does not get
Yes.
played anywhere near as much as Consortium Star Viper. This
Nope. Yep.
is fair. But you look at the cards that are like linchpins of decks, and it's Boba, it's Luke, it's Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So, but so part of it is, yeah, we want to get these like game warping characters out of the game.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think that's.
I think money is
big a
actually
problem.
absolutely like another part of it, right? Is that like anybody can afford to get a deck with commons.
Right.
Probably.
And I think in Star Wars Unlimited, uncommons is also true, right? Like there aren't like uncommons are going for 25, 50 cents. I mean, and there's so many just key ones. Power of the Dark Side, like Rebel Assault, Overwhelming Barrage. Like there's so many great, you got Kanan, you got Yoda. There's just so many uncommons that it's like
you need the uncommons. Yeah, I feel like I'm strongly in favor of if you are going to do a rarity based format, including uncommons. Magic has a big enough card pool that they can get by with commons only because enough stuff has been printed at common that you can do it. But the uncommons help to provide focus to the deck, and I think that uncommons are not that ridiculous in terms of rate.
Yeah, exactly. And like you want to play blue villainy, like Power of the Dark Side is, I mean, Vanquish, Takedown, those are common. So Power of the Dark Side, like have at it. And
I thought Vanquish was uncommon.
Oh, then further reinforcing my point.
Yeah.
Like you got Sabine unit, just like absolute keystone of a
red heroism
deck.
Yeah.
At uncommon, So I understand. So these are great formats.
Yeah.
And I think as the card pool grows, and especially like, we're going to get to some point where, I mean, Vader, the worst case scenario in my mind is Vader, Boba, Luke synergize aggressively with something in Shadows. And I mean, we've already seen cards that they didn't anticipate being as strong, being strong. Something synergizes with those. And so now we've got a Shadows format that desires Darth Vader, that desires Boba, that desires Luke, and they become even. And now you're in, October, and they're $150.
Packs aren't coming for a while. Yeah.
So I feel like a Padawan common uncommon format makes sense. And then so we've got rarity and rotation. Yep. And then there's rules based format, right? And again this comes back to something like Twin Suns, where we've fundamentally changed the rules of the game. 2 leaders is the and people constantly want to play 1v1 with 2 leaders because it seems so fun. That is technically a format you could play with Star Wars Unlimited. People obviously love the idea of I don't agree with these people and get over it, but constantly positing, let's play Star Wars Unlimited, but the uniqueness rule applies by name.
Right. So you can't have Sabine leader and Sabine unit on the same battle on the arena at the same time. Yeah.
Right. And sure, like that's a format you could play.
Yeah.
But these are ones that fundamentally change not just the deck construction rules, but the rules of how the game is played.
Right. A common one that a lot of people like to do as like a night, a one-off to the note of like one night formats. In Magic, it's called Omniscience, but it's basically you have unlimited resources every turn. Just you can play one thing, but you have unlimited resources every turn. Go nuts.
You can only play one thing though.
You play one thing per turn, but you can play whatever. Like you have unlimited resources.
Oh, okay. So
just
stack
or sometimes it's like you just have unlimited resources. Go nuts. I think with Swoo that's going to work less well because you're drawing 2 a turn. Right. So, but
you get to play one card, go ham, just all Star Destroyers.
Just like you want to smash your Transformers into each other. This is the format, right?
I love the sound of that, and I'm super on board. The one that I always loved from Hearthstone was the decks have to be odd or even.
Oh yeah.
I think they were called Tavern Brawls.
Yeah.
I always thought that was great, of just cleaving the card pool in half, and like it's all available. Mm-hmm. But and that's a deck construction, but it really fundamentally changes the rules of the game
Yeah.
one or the other, and that kind of goes back to, and this is where like deck construction versus underlying rules of the game gets overlap. But those formats of, I always felt like the digital games, because they have this desire to like get you to log in every week, always felt the need to do some of this stuff. It was always a really great, like, I mean, some of this I think stems from a desire to force people to not net deck, right? Like,
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that that is a driving factor behind the prevalence of a lot of formats. I am tired of playing against your stupid boba deck. Let's do something different, but I still want to play SWU.
Right, and I still want to be able to like, I don't want it to be random. So I still want to like actually think about my deck and what cards to put into it, and try to win. But I have fundamentally broken an underlying assumption that made this deck good. And I think, okay. So now you put a note in Jumpstart. What is Jumpstart? That's a magic thing. It's a special kind of
magic
pack.
thing. Yes. So the conceit behind Jumpstart is, let's say that you want to play a randomized but synergized format. And what I mean by that is, when you're drafting, right? Let's say that I want to play red-green heroism, right? There might be some linchpin cards for my strategy. If I don't get past those cards, or I'm just not, if I can't do that, then my deck is going to be a train wreck, right? If I try and force red-green heroism when I'm not getting the cards, I get a train wreck, right? So you have to read the signals, and there's all this stuff that goes into it. But what if instead there were packs, and inside of the packs there were themes, right? And there were essentially two themes smooshed together, and you just shuffled up and played. So, for example,
each pack is one theme, and you would buy two packs.
Well, I think each pack is either one or two themes. It's been a while since I've looked at Jumpstart, but and the idea is that, like, okay, I get these two packs. One is like goblins, and the other one is angels, and I shuffle them together, and I've got like a deck that has two synergy components.
Isn't that just? I mean, okay, so Richard Garfield made Magic.
It's Smash Up, right? Smash Up. Yeah, it is related to Smash Up, but like the theming
Did Richard Garfield make
tight.
Jumpstart? Do you know?
I think he might have.
Or is that just weird?
I need to look it up, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
it gives you the synergies, and it gives you, like, you get the feeling of playing a deck where somebody thought about, like, okay, how do these pieces mesh together, and let's get some stuff
on board. You'd have to do it as more with Star Wars Unlimited. You'd have to pre-build these. Because I know people have made their own Jumpstart packs. I've seen on Etsy, like, or GameGenic maybe made like things. So you'd have to pre-build.
Yeah. So you'd have like a pack that would be like Han, and then another pack that would be like Leia, right? Like the Han pack.
Would you have to do it with a leader?
No, not necessarily with a leader. I picked leaders, but like you could do like an underworld.
Here's heroism yellow.
Right. Yeah.
Here's a heroism yellow. 25 cards of heroism yellow that I think are great.
Yeah.
And they have yellow, and they have heroism.
Yep.
And yellow heroism.
Yep.
And then here's green heroism. So you obviously have to choose the same morality.
Right. Or maybe you relax it, right? Like, or maybe you relax it for purposes of this.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
That just ends up being 4 aspects that gets tricky. But yeah. So okay, and then so you could build your own Jumpstart packs of just, hey, I've pre-sleeved 15 or 25 or 20 cards.
And we're just going to smash together. And when you want people to get a feel of constructed of like, so if I want to introduce somebody to the game, and I don't want to hand them a starter deck, right? Because most of the time, if I hand them a starter deck, like the starter decks, typically the synergies are weaker. It's more of like a more randomized card pool. You can't take them to draft, right? Because they don't know what they're drafting, and there's this whole skill association that's required about drafting. You take somebody new to draft night, they're going to have a bad time. You give them a constructed deck.
I just want to pause for a moment
Yeah.
and just give a shout out to Benny, my match one at Guardian Games at draft about 9 nights back. Benny sat down. Benny and opens acknowledging that he doesn't have a total grasp of the rules. He is that new. He's still not quite sure how to play Star Wars Unlimited, but he came with his friend to play Star Wars. He was excited. That man signed up to get wrecked for an entire evening.
And it's a bad feel, man.
But he was such a nice, enjoyable person. And to be that kind of person and to be that up and sign up, be like that pumped about Star Wars, you're like, I'm going to go draft a game I barely know. Just a credit to, good people. So, but you don't do that. You don't force your friend to do that.
You don't do that, right? And if you hand them a constructed deck, like a lot of times constructed decks have a lot of subtle synergies that aren't necessarily obvious, right? Like if you
don't
were
want to play this card, it's a 2-cost card, but you obviously don't play it in the first 5 turns ever, right?
Right. Or let's take like a really weird example, right? Like Casino Han, right? Like Casino Han, people are going to look at their hands and think, what the heck, what on
am I
earth?
supposed to do with this? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So the idea behind Jumpstart is you've got your synergies, you smoosh them together, people get to experience the synergies, they get to experience like stuff working together without necessarily having to build a deck themselves. It was very popular. It was hard to stay in print. There's a lot of reasons for that have to do with magic stuff, but I think it's a good idea, and I generally I want to make Jumpstart Star Wars Unlimited packs. Yeah, I think you should. I think you should.
And I think to your point of like getting people hyped, like people who are excited about Star Wars, to just be like, what are your favorite things about Star Wars? I like Jedi. Oh, cool. What kind of Jedi? Oh, I'm real big on like Kanan and so forth. Oh, okay. Here's Blue Heroism Jedi deck.
Yeah, here's like the Jedi pack. And like, what's your second favorite thing about Star Wars? Han Solo.
I like droids or Han Solo. Yeah, boom, done.
Yeah. Boom.
And
go.
You have some synergy. No, now I'm elated and excited, and I want to wrap up the episode so I can start.
I don't think the card pool is quite big enough yet to support that, but I think especially once we get shadows out there,
and it's funny that you say that there's a lot of ideas waiting in the wings, which gets to our kind of last big weird format. The one that I'm absolutely fascinated by is cubes.
Cubes.
And cubes, in a sense, aren't a weird format, right? They are. I mean, they are, but and they can be. But it sounds like there's nothing consistent about cube other than it's a stack of cards.
Largely. So to refresh the conceit behind cube. Cube
Dear
is
listener,
a limited.
If you're not familiar with cubes,
yes, cube is a limited format. The idea is somebody has a big box of cards. You construct fictitious 15-ish card draft packs from them, and then you draft those packs as if you were drafting like regular packs. The difference generally is that cubes are typically curated subsets of cards that are either like the classic cubes are, do you want to draft, but do you want to draft with cards that are amazing? Here's like, you can draft the Power 9, right? Obviously, you don't keep it afterwards.
It goes back into the cube. But alternatively, I love ones that are like, it's just all one color. This is a white cube, a blue cube. It's just all blue cards, 100 blue cards.
Yep.
Everybody's playing blue.
Yep.
You all hate each other.
Yep.
But yeah, the idea of the curated experience. I really want to go for, this is my original trilogy themed
cube.
Star Wars Unlimited cube. It's just Galactic Civil War or original trilogy or
Yeah, no, exactly. And you get to have a lot of fun with and the cube it gives also the cube designer a lot of those sort of like good feels that you get from designing like a really good deck. Except that you're not designing a deck, you're designing a limited format. So if you like to play amateur game designer, you get to do that and be like, okay,
There's artistic expression.
yeah,
there.
yeah,
And I think that's something to be said is that even more so, a deck has to be like mechanically good,
yes,
right? Like it has to be that good isn't the right word. It has to be. You want it to be competitive.
yes,
You want it to be capable of winning games.
yes,
Whereas a cube is more of a dance, where like it has to be mechanically interesting,
yes,
right? But because everybody's pulling from the same pool, if it's mechanic, if you've done something weird, like say it's all one aspect,
right,
well then just everybody's playing that aspect, like that,
yeah,
you know, and everybody's on the same like back foot or the same
Yeah.
handicap.
Yeah,
There's,
I mean, like in a
lot
perfect example, yeah, like obviously you can badly design a cube, and I'm sure that in the future we'll have a whole episode about cube design. But you want to make sure that like the power is uniform across the cards. That there's not like obviously that not every card is going to be the same, but you want to make sure it's not just like, oh, whoever drafts the, you know, Vader unit is just going to win, right?
right. There's
Yeah.
got to be some actual no. That's why
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
there can be a well-designed cube,
Yes,
but you're not bound by the same convention of needing to win because
No.
you're creating a closed ecosystem. Everybody
Yes.
is in this ecosystem. So as
Yeah.
long as it's well-designed garbage, or if it's just well-designed Power 9, it's just well-designed
Yeah.
God tier cards,
yeah.
everybody can just, oh yeah, I'm going to toss these
Yeah.
two Vaders because they don't work because I'm playing in a cube that is nothing but the best of the best. Or,
Yeah, no, exactly. And you get to have a lot of fun, and this is another example of a format. You know, and formats can get even more extreme. You know, there are some formats in Magic. One that I want to talk about just briefly is Don Don, where you're playing from the same library. Your deck is the same, and so you're both drawing from the same deck.
discard, right?
Yes, same deck, same discard, and bunch of really goofy weirdness. But yeah, like the beauty of formats is they allow you to experience the card game in a different way, and you know, see different ways, and still get to play with the cards that you love, but not have to go through your 12th Boba versus Sabine match.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's why it's fascinating to me. But now that we've discussed it ad nauseum, is the demand for Star Wars Unlimited weird format seems to be almost exclusively around rarity, right? It's around
Yes.
supply availability. People want to play formats where they can get the cards. And Star Wars Unlimited is still new, right? It's only 2 months old. Not even, technically. And so there isn't a need to go back to some halcyon days of Star Wars Unlimited. We are in the original halcyon days.
Yes.
You know, there's no need to say, how do I breathe new life into Boba Fett as a leader, right? Like, we're still exploring the topography of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
But that will come. Right?
Yes.
Like, people will reach a point where, okay, set 6 feels like, and don't at me when this is not true, but set 6 just feels like a rehash of the themes of sets 1 and 2. And then suddenly it's like, well, how do I make this weird and different? So, okay, that covers my familiarity, like what I could find on weird formats.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are as many formats as there are people who have played games. Probably more, but
Everybody's an amateur game designer.
everyone is an amateur game designer, and some of us just more than others.
I guess before we close out, Ned, of Star Wars Unlimited on a long enough timeline, not Winston, what weird format are you hyped about? Are you excited?
I think that a jumpstart like format would be really exciting once we have enough of a card pool. I like the idea of just like, okay, let's do synergy based pod zone. I'm less enthusiastic about the rarity based formats, mostly because I don't know that I have a good enough feeling for rare versus uncommon versus common. At what level do you see like interesting synergies as opposed to interchangeable pieces. And then I am curious about how. I don't think that they've. We'll see. I definitely would not Winston draft again, but
No.
cube, once we have enough cards for interesting and novel cubes, I'm always down for a cube draft.
I think I agree. Cube and Jumpstart. Now that I know about Jumpstart, I'm very excited. And Jumpstart feels like it's on a shorter timeline than Cube.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But the one I'm going to say, I'm actually super excited for Padawan.
Okay.
To become common enough, just because I want the game to be approachable, right? Like I don't want anybody to feel priced out of some aspect of Star Wars Unlimited. And I was giving away uncommons at my I messaged my sealed league. I was like, hey, is anybody still missing uncommons? The showdowns are approaching, like any rares that are like not the super competitive ones, but for your weird jank deck, like hit me up. Like I don't want to sell them. Like I have like, what surplus do you need? And the idea of a Padawan format of just being able to build decks, and then somebody's like, oh, that's such a weird, crazy deck, and it's like, oh yeah, you just joined. Here, keep it. You like this deck? It's your deck now. Like, and the most expensive part of this deck is the 50 cards I sleeved it with, right? Like that feels like such a fun way to just on-ramp people to the game. And so, I'm excited about Jumpstart. I'm excited about Cube. I'm excited about everything new, but anything like just, there's nothing more fun than, there was a gentleman brought his little toddler, but he was so excited to play, and there was a spot open at our sealed escalation league, and he had clearly been doing it for like a week, but he was just like so filled with joy, and I was like, yes, like we got to get more product out there so that we can feed that, like positively reinforce that you're excited, and a Padawan style format that like you have a reasonable chance in a major metropolitan area of finding other people who are playing that format it makes it so much easier for people to on ramp. They don't have to hunt down, and also, like, as somebody who wants to be competitive, like there's nothing worse than being like, well, do I bring my Vaders to the weekly OP night? Like, do I be that guy? I don't want to be the guy who brings them, but I also
strike them down, give in to your anger.
Right, but I also don't want to be the guy who doesn't bring them and then spends the evening playing against people who did, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, in a lower rarity format, you can go ham, be as mean and aggressive as you want, because, I mean, if you didn't like this 14-cent card, you should have brought 3 of your own, right? Like, it doesn't.
Sorry, dude. Yeah.
Sorry. So, all right. I think that's all she wrote. This was episode 14 of The Force Unlimited. Today is Revenge of the 5th, 2024. Dear listener, if you have any thoughts in general, but specifically if you have a weird format in your favorite TCG, please email us at theforceunlimited@gmail.com. Ned, do you have any final thoughts?
How do you pronounce Ma Conkley? Is there going to be like a pronunciation guide? Because
I had to look into that. Yeah, there has how do you spell it? And I was like, that card, I hate it. Like, I saw that card, I was like that card just encapsulates everything.
It's beautiful.
You and I disagree on in terms of playstyle. I just saw that card, I was like, no. So, okay. With that, dear listener, we will see you in 2 to 3 weeks.
Adios.